Smith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. 60 consecutive days means that some days you may come and at 1 o'clock get to participate in a clinic by the UMass basketball team. Some days you might get a show from one of the great basketball entertainers in the game. Other days you can meet Hall of Famers, and then you can meet icons, which is who I have for you today. LaPhonso Ellis, for the next 25 minutes, it's just LaPhonso and I. I'm going to tell him about how I always picked him in NBA Jam. I'm going to tell him about how his block in '94 was one of the coolest things I ever saw. No, I'm kidding. I get to help LaPhonso and just sit by and listen to his fantastic story. In about 25 minutes, I'm going to ask you if maybe you have a question for LaPhonso Ellis. So we'll select a handful of you for that privilege as well. And after that, the fun keeps going. LaPhonso Ellis will walk to that table on my right, your left, and he'll sign an autograph for each and every one of you. Now, we have a bunch of appearances still to come. Next week alone, Taco Fall, Hamidou Diallo, Robert Williams, so many more. Go to hoophall.com and check out the full list. But let me get to our guest today. LaPhonso Ellis was the #5 overall draft pick in 1992, behind names like Shaq, Mourning, Leitner, and Jimmy Jackson, the only 4 people drafted ahead of him. He's a power forward with the Nuggets, the Hawks, the T-Wolves, and the Heat. He was a member of the NBA's all-rookie first team, a Notre Dame hoop icon, a 2-time Illinois state champion, and one of the best college basketball analysts in the media, bar none. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for LaPhonso Ellis. Thank you, sir. Such a pleasure. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yes, looking forward to it. You bet. Hello, everyone. How are you? Good to see you.
So welcome back to Springfield, LaPhonso. You mentioned off mic that this is only your second time in Springfield, and certainly the first time with this crowd here to listen to you speak. So I want to talk to you about this moment. Before we go all the way back to East St. Louis and we talk about Notre Dame and your incredible NBA career and the work you're doing now, I'm curious about this moment. You have accomplished so much, and yet here we are sitting beneath the eyes of all of the immortals in the game, the Hall of Famers that have come before, in front of a group of fans who have traveled to hear you speak. What is this moment like for LaPhonso Ellis after all you've already done in the game?
Wow, yeah, I actually feel quite overwhelmed. Chelsea took me around and got a chance to see all of the inductees, and realizing that I had the privilege of being coached by some, had the privilege to play for Pat Riley, Lenny Wilkins, of course, both as a player and a coach. And then I was sandwiched, had the privilege to play with a good group. You mentioned Shaquille O'Neal, but I was sandwiched between 2 great generations of players as well. I had the privilege of playing against Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, John Stockton. I just missed Larry Bird. He had a back injury and didn't get a chance to play against him my rookie year. But then Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, and to just kind of walk around and take all of that in was just, yeah, quite overwhelming.
It's so great for me. I'm overwhelmed, and I have never played with any of them. It's great to sit here with you and know that even for a guy who has put in the minutes and the years that you have, that it's also overwhelming for you. That's just comforting for me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you realize that, you know, I had the privilege of playing for 11 years, and, you know, you make what you think is a decent contribution to the game, and then you look around and you go, wow, my contribution was so insignificant. It's not even funny.
I can't wait to talk about some of those rosters that you had a chance to really highlight, you know, in Denver. But first I want to go all the way back to your childhood, because you grew up on the Mississippi River, East St. Louis, which is not a town sort of known for its easy way of living. I mean,
sure.
And so I'm curious about how a young LaPhonso Ellis, how does your childhood help to shape the man and the player that the world would eventually get to know?
Wow. It's interesting because as a nearly 50-year-old adult, East St. Louis for many years was one of the worst places to live in our country because of the poverty, gang violence, drugs, etc. However, even growing up in Section 8 housing, during that generation, I didn't know we were poor until I went to school for the first time, and then I realized how much lack we had.
Yeah.
But having said that, what a wonderful community of people that I got a chance to grow up around, who were very supportive of me and my mom, who raised 2 boys on her own. There's a spirit of generosity, even in the poverty. You'd run low on sugar, you can go next door and borrow a cup of sugar from Miss Avery until, of course, you were able to pay that sugar back the next week. And that trend continued for me all from the time we'd moved to East St. Louis when I was 4 to the time I graduated from high school as an 18-year-old. So many wonderful, beautiful people who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, who were willing to make that kind of investment in time and money and energy. And I'm so grateful and appreciative of all of them, because any of us who've had the privilege of being successful in anything know that we don't do it on our own. There's some people who God's placed in our lives throughout our lifetime who make these deep, indelible marks on our lives that help form our consciousness, our awareness of people around us, even pushing us and motivating us to ultimately be the best, in that case, athlete and student that you could possibly be. So I'm very grateful to all those people.
I love it put in that context. It really helps to understand. So we'll get to your Notre Dame years in a moment, but I think that putting it into that context really, really makes sense on so many levels. By the time you get to high school, your hoop star had already risen. I mean, you win 2 state titles. You famously clash with Alonzo Mourning in a holiday tournament. And this is a real special era of the McDonald's All-American game and high school hoop. It was before social media.
Sure.
So talk to us, if you would, about when your love for hoop. Clearly your star had risen by the time you get to high school. Where does the love start? What's your earliest memory of loving the game?
I don't know if I could necessarily put it in that context. Is when you grow up, again, Section 8 housing, the housing development, let's say this basketball is kind of the center table, if you will. There's a sports field out there that you play football, etc. There's a full court basketball hoop, and then there's kind of like a jungle gym. Our generation, we call them monkey bars. The big kids wouldn't, and the adults wouldn't allow us to play on the main courts. Yeah. So you had to be creative and come up with the way that you could hoop. And so these monkey bars, we literally played basketball on those monkey bars. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily a means to an end. It was just something that we did for enjoyment. So I played hoops, played a little football, played a little baseball, but I just really enjoyed playing basketball, and we played it in any form we possibly could. We would even take milk crates, and for you young kids that don't know what they are, they're probably I don't know, maybe 12 by 12, maybe 16 by 16, little carton, if you will, almost like a topless box that we would cut the bottom out of, and then we would nail it against a light pole or anything that we could find wooden, and we would actually shoot hoops on that. So Dr. Naismith thought he had something cool with the peach basket. Yeah. We were able to create a nice little opportunity for us to play away from the big kids too with the milk crate.
Just rebrand it.
Yes, exactly.
It's crate ball.
Come on now.
No, your senior year, you're a McDonald's All-American. In that game, I mentioned it a bit. I mean, we're talking about Sean Kemp, Christian Leitner. We're talking about Chris Jackson I mean, just an incredible, of course, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf at the time, Chris Jackson. And that experience had to be one of those moments where in the pre-social media era where the world started to speed up a little bit for you? Is that safe to say? Because that was when the hype, and we're roughly the same vintage, that was roughly when I remember being like, I can't wait to see this Ellis guy in person. Because we would just read about you in magazines. Sure. So was that did the McDonald's All-American game sort of help to accelerate things for you, or were you already part of the journey?
Truthfully, I never thought I really belonged. And so,
Wow.
everyone has a different thing that kind of motivates them, and it's usually, unfortunately, something negative that you feel either some form of lack and for me, it's, it's Alonzo Mourning, household name. Sean Kemp, my generation, household names. And I never, at least personally, felt like I was on that caliber. And so that kind of drove my work. I had a guy named Orlando Hampton who I met when I was 10, fifth grade, who felt I had some talent. And so he began to work with me and teach me how to play the game. But I almost felt a little bit of almost like disrespect amongst my hometown people, because it was almost as if though our teams had achieved so much, I always felt inferior to those guys. And so that drove my work habits, because I always wanted to prove that I actually belonged. And so having an opportunity to play against Alonzo Mourning in St. Louis in front of my hometown people and the St. Louis community, I was really looking forward to that one.
Oh gosh, I love going back and watching the highlights of that particular game. That class was special. It really was. But I'd love now to talk about your recruitment, because you had, your options were limitless. And yet, I'm going to put this when Digger Phelps comes into your living room.
Big deal.
It's a big deal. What did Coach tell you to make you realize that South Bend, your home now, all these years later, what did Coach Phelps say to make you realize that that was the right decision to start?
I'm not sure it was one thing necessarily that he sold me on. I didn't want to go through the craziness of the recruiting process, so I narrowed my schools down to 4 early. The University of Illinois, out of respect for my home state school, Notre Dame in the Midwest, UCLA in the West, and then Syracuse in the East. And that was kind of nice, because that was a bit settling, because there's a frantic nature that comes along with the whole recruiting process that can be, especially not having a dad in the home and someone I could really talk to about it, it was a bit overwhelming. And so I kind of came up with the strategy of narrowing my choices early. Digger, Notre Dame is a global brand, and Digger said, you come and apply yourself, and you graduated with a degree from Notre Dame. Our network of Notre Dame people throughout the world, there will be limitless opportunities for you. I was actually, though, going to go to UCLA. My good friend Derek Martin, who is a senior and an All-American as well, he and I decided that we wanted to go play together there. He was from Los Angeles. So the night before signing day, I decided to go play for UCLA.
Really?
And I awakened the next morning, and my mom said, "Where'd you decide to go to school?" And I said, "I'm going to go to UCLA and play with Derek." She said, "Oh, baby, can you stay closer to home?" So East St. Louis being a smaller city, Notre Dame being this school with a huge name, but only at that time, I think 7,500 undergraduates, was like the perfect fit for me. And even 30 plus years later, if I had to make the decision all over again, I'd go right back there.
Man, Mom. Thank you. Wherever I'm hoping your mom. Thank you. That is a great story. So I'd like to go down to draft night, 1992 draft night for you. Your Notre Dame career was just so much fun to watch. Obviously early on, you guys qualify for the tournament. You have a couple of NIT runners-up. So draft night comes, and I remember this night distinctly because it was Shaquille and Alonzo, and we all knew that was going to happen that way. I'm wondering how your experience was on draft night, knowing that. Did you know that it was going to be Denver, and when did you know, and how did that sit with a then 22-year-old LaPhonso Ellis?
Let's see, going into the draft, I think they were saying I was going to go between 22 and 30 in the first round. I ended up visiting, let's see, time goes by, so I can't remember exactly. But if I remember correctly, I think I visited 10 teams in 16 days.
Wow.
One team twice, so the Nuggets had me in twice. What happened is the rumor was that I couldn't shoot the basketball because I was a back to the basket guy. But my teams, I played with such great guards, particularly, that we didn't need me to shoot from the perimeter, so I rarely did. But I was very comfortable shooting the ball facing the basket because I felt if you could shoot a 8 to 10 foot turnaround jump shot with your back to the basket, it can't be that difficult to make the transition. But that was the knock, is that I had also been academically ineligible twice. And so the two things were circulating. One was that I couldn't shoot the basketball from the perimeter. The other was they had questioned my work ethic because of my academic ineligibilities. And so, yeah, so the week before the draft, again, 22 to 30, but by this time I had gone on those visits and had the privilege of shooting the basketball very well. In fact, I shot it so well in Denver, they literally had me come back a second time, got me off of the airplane, wouldn't let me eat, drink, or anything, or go to the hotel, and took me straight out to the floor, practically, I'm exaggerating only a little, in street clothes, and put me through this whole shooting thing again. And so shot the ball pretty well. So I felt they had the 5th pick and the 13th pick that year, but draft morning, I think my agent said I was going somewhere between 17 and 21, but then about 2 hours before the draft, it was 10 to 17, and so I felt that at worst, Denver would take me at the 13th pick because I know that they were pleased with my workouts. And the interview process, I was able to explain to them that, I was just a late bloomer in terms of maturity. Yeah. And hopefully my work academically, second spring semester of my junior year, and my work academically my senior year had demonstrated that I turned the corner. And so that worked in my favor. And so 15 minutes before Denver was to announce their 5th pick, my agent leaned over and said that they were going to take me at number 5. And so I was very grateful because I felt like they were taking a chance just based on what the public perception that had been created by what I had done, which allowed myself to be academically ineligible twice.
You get to Denver, and that locker room, for my money, there's a young Dikembe,
Yeah.
LaPhonso Ellis, Chris Jackson, who is still playing in the Big Three.
Yes.
I can't believe he can still get it too.
He could flat out shoot it.
He can still.
He was. I kid you not, folks. And if you've not seen him, I recommend that you go to YouTube and watch some of his old highlights. I know how well respected Steph Curry is, and deservedly so. But you talk about unlimited range and the ability to get into his shot, whether off of a crossover, behind the back, double. Chris Jackson, formerly Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, he was the Steph Curry of our generation.
Absolutely, 100%. And you have Dan Issel as coach. I mean, you walk in.
Brian Stith, Virginia, Reggie Williams.
I mean,
Bison Dele.
That team
Rodney Rogers.
was great. That's right,
Yeah.
Rodney Rogers.
Tom Hammonds.
How long did it take for you to feel at home in the locker room there? Because that's a lot of personalities that we just named.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Brian Stith and I were a little bit arch enemies in college. We played against each other each year. He wore 20, I wore 20. I thought he was wearing my number. His Virginia Cavaliers beat us my senior year in the championship game of the postseason NIT. So, but we hit it off right away. Tom Hammonds was one of my favorite college players. And you talk about chemistry off the floor that leads to chemistry on the floor. We had, 9 of our 12 guys that attended team chapel together. We would all go eat together. We were very integrated into each other's families. I was Uncle Fonz to all of their children. They were Uncle Dikembe, Uncle Bryant, even to this day. And so we had a unique chemistry off the floor that translated to wins for us on the floor.
It did, and even though that first year, I don't have an iconic playoff moment to mention, that second year, there is a video out in the foyer of Dikembe Mutombo laying on the floor. I'm sure you've all seen it out there. It's in the Dikembe. And that is from one of my favorite moments in NBA history, which is your Denver Nuggets team.
Sure.
As the first number 8 seed to ever take out a number 1 seed in that format in the sport. It was the Seattle Supersonics I mean, the entire
Gary Payton, Detlef Schrempf.
Oh my! And that series, I still can't believe it was that long ago. Talk to me about that moment for you. Again, all these years later, is that still one of those, on a good night, you can still dream about that moments?
Yeah, there's not, for my career, that was cut short or hampered by early injuries.
Yeah.
Is you like to have those defining moments in your career that you can look back on and enjoy, particularly as you get older, and to have an opportunity to have participated on a team of great guys. Good, strong, solid coaches who had their own chemistry. Dan Issel, he was a first-year coach. Gene Littles, Mike Evans, they had a chemistry amongst them also. But to have the privilege of being a part of history in that way, and considering myself one of those underdog, at least in personalities, to be down 2-0 to the team that had the best record in the league, and to be able to come back and tie it up 2-2 and went into game 5 feeling like we could pull it out. And part of that was, especially for you young kids here, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And we felt, no, sincerely, sincerely.
Yeah.
And we felt that there was a rumor that I found out later was true, is, let's see, my understanding is that they didn't bring any change of clothing because they were expecting to win game 3 and go home. And so that's kind of the air that had been permeating the news waves that entire series. And no, we had one of our guys that came on the bus as we were getting ready to go over to play game 5 that literally got into the faces of every guy and said, "Do you believe we can win?" And it went from a quick, yes, and we took that confidence out there on the floor and were able to shock the world in overtime.
And there are many people, maybe one of them sitting here, who believe that 5-game series win effectively ended the 5-game series format. They're like, we can't have 8 seeds doing this.
Sure.
We need our stars playing deep. And you guys were absolutely star-studded. So here's the point that I was telling you where I would give you a warning. I only have 3 questions left for LaPhonso Ellis. So that means if there's a question you've always wanted to ask, this is your chance to get it going. After this, I'll ask for some volunteers. Some of my friends from the Hoop Hall staff will put you in a line to our right, your left. After Denver, you make brief stops in a few other cities, Atlanta, Miami, and Minnesota. And it's really awesome when I think about guys who have the opportunity to get to see the world and to get to see the country the way that you did, through basketball.
Sure.
Were there any one of those stops that you wish could have lasted a little bit longer? Any community that you just really felt great about that you would have loved to do another couple of years there?
It would have been Denver. I wanted to be one of those guys that started their career in that city and finished my career in that city. Had the privilege of getting off to a great start in my first 2 years, averaging 15 points and 9 rebounds both years. And there were rumors going around that I would make the All-Star team possibly in a loaded West with Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Sean Kemp, a lot of the names that I just mentioned. And I was injured. I missed my entire 3rd season with a knee issue, half of my 4th season with the same knee issue, and came back and ended up being 10th in the league in scoring my 5th year, only to rupture my Achilles tendon with 7 games to go. And so I was just never the same player. God gave me grace to be able to play another 6 years, but I was never the same player after that. But still to this day, my heart just beats in Denver. I love the memories. My wife and I started our young lives together there. Our old neighborhood is still there, and that was a community that really embraced my family and embraced our young franchise. Well, not our young franchise, but our young team as well. So I wish I could have started and ended in Denver. Although my other 3 stops were great.
Yeah, for sure.
Minneapolis, best kept secret of the Midwest. Great town.
Completely agree. Great food. As you can see, I'm a food guy.
And who wouldn't enjoy living in Miami?
Touche. Do you have a question for LaPhonso Ellis? Put your hands in the air, and one of my friends from the Hoop Hall staff will come and gather a handful of you to our right, your left. Now, since your playing days have ended, and I mean this, I said this to you in person off mic, your work as an analyst, as someone who does a bit of broadcasting as well, your work as an analyst is so natural.
You kind, thanks.
You and clearly your love for the game is, we can all feel it, but what is it about the broadcast game that seems to fit your style of communication so well?
My wife and I have this saying in our home that kids and hoops.
Yeah.
And so, even a senior kid my kids are 32, nearly 28, 25, and will be 20 in November. So all of these kids could be my kids.
Yeah.
And to get a chance to watch them as freshmen, a little bit uncomfortable, unsure of themselves, and then by their sophomore or junior years, they're comfortable looking you straight in the eyes, answering your questions with great depth and thought is really cool. And I get the privilege to be, at least as I'm preparing for a game, to get into the heads of some of the greatest coaches of all time, from Coach K to Jim Boeheim, each and every night, to guys who are a little bit more under the radar but have been excellent too, like a Mike Bray at Notre Dame.
Do you think, and this is more of just me talking hoops with you, you mentioned that progress, the progression of the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. One of the reasons why I love watching, Arch Madness, the Missouri Valley and stuff like that, is because you get to watch that progress. You get to see a guy, Fred VanVleet, who was a nice player as a freshman and a sophomore, but was ridiculously dope as a senior.
Yeah.
Do we miss out a little bit? Does the college game miss that, the ability to watch a guy develop for 4 years?
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And you think of all of the great collegiate icons from back in the day, whether it's a Patrick Ewing or Christian Laettner. We all had the pleasure of being able to watch them as freshmen grow as people and grow their games for 4 years. And I think that helped us actually even embrace not only them as a player, but their teams as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's lost today.
Kids and Hoops, our new friend, LaPhonso Ellis. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a round of applause. Now, the fun continues. You can see to my right, your left, you have a line of folks who are going to ask the hard questions now, LaPhonso. I'm going to warn you, these are going to be the hard ones.
Can I get off the hot seat?
Absolutely, yeah. Come on, stand on up. Yeah. So come on, we'll take these one at a time, and I only have 2 requests. 1, you let me hold the mic, and 2, introduce yourself to LaPhonso and let him know where you're from.
Hi, Kurt from Philly.
I don't like that shirt you're wearing.
I'm curious how you found out about Brian Williams, Bison Dele, and if he was a teammate that you were close with.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you before, that group, we were all really tight. My fondest memory of Bison Dele, I don't know if you know much about Denver, Colorado, but one of the cool things about it is in the middle of the winter, it can start snowing at like 2 a.m., drop maybe 1.5 feet, and yet because of being 5,280 feet in altitude, by about noon, the sun comes out and it melts everything in the road. Unfortunately, this day, Bison Dele comes over to the house, rings the doorbell. He's got snow all over his boots, walks in, dragging snow all in my house, and yes, not in the weirdness of my floors, and he didn't offer to clean it up. But you talk about a talent. I mean, 6'11", about 255 pounds, could run left-handed, could knock down a 10, 15-foot jump shot. And he had some kind of issue with David Robinson because every time we played San Antonio, you knew Bison Dele was going to get a double-double. Dunked one on top of his head one time, caught it coming out of the net, and put it in his chest and got a technical foul. But he was, I played against him in college in New York in the preseason NIT, and you just knew he was going to be a stud. He was a phenomenal player.
So did you see it on the news, or did you get a personal message from somebody when his accident happened?
Yeah, sadly. Yeah, and it's one of those things where sadly, I've lost 2. Lorenzen Wright was also my teammate down in Atlanta, and so guys who passed away way too young. And just recently, are we getting a little bit more information on what happened with Lorenzen? We still don't know what fully happened with Bison Dele. Such a loss.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. All right, we'll take the next one. How are you, sir? Good, thank you. What's your name?
I'm Gabe from Philly.
How you
Nice
doing?
to meet you.
How's your killer crossover?
Not great. Not great.
Mine either, so you're in good company.
Not great.
My question for you was, from today's game, which player do you respect the most, or would you want to play with if you were in the league now?
Wow. Wow. That's tough. I have two. He's a little older now, so he's not quite the Russell Westbrook that we knew when he was younger, meaning I love two-way players, guys who at the end of the game that they've left every single ounce of everything that they could give on the floor, and that was Russell Westbrook. He doesn't play the defensive end with the reckless abandon that he did earlier, and part of that just because he's older and he has to conserve a little bit of his energy for the offensive end, but Russell's one, and the Greek freak is the other, and part of that is I'm a pretty compassionate dude, so I'm one of those huggy, touchy-feely kind of guys, but back in our day, it wasn't like that. So I love Giannis's professional approach, and he, like Russell, gives every ounce of everything that he has, doesn't take a possession off, but I kind of like the fact that he doesn't kind of hug his opponents and all of that. So, what a unique talent.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Great,
nice
thank you.
to meet you. Sure, thanks.
Great question.
Let's work on our crossover together, deal?
Hey, bud.
AJ Bean from Connecticut.
AJ, how are you, kid?
You too.
Good to see you.
Good. So, what is the hardest player that you've played against to score on?
To score on. That would be, you're too young for this guy, but his name's Mark Eaton. During the John Stockton, Karl Malone days, they had a guy, Mark Eaton, if I remember correctly, was like 7'3" or 7'4", and he was slender but really strong. And my rookie year, I had heard about how good he was of protecting the paint and blocking shots, etc. So I said, in the back of my mind, I'm going to try to dunk one on him. So I got the opportunity. We set a pick and roll. I rolled. I think it was Brian Stith or Mahmoud gave me a nice little bounce pass, and I was like, yes, my moment, one-on-one with Mark Eaton. So I jumped, cocked the ball back. I hit his body. My body hit his body. He stayed vertical, and I fell back that way. Mark Eaton, they used to call him the mountain man. Mark Eaton was the most difficult guy to score the ball over.
Great, thank you, AJ.
Nice to meet you, kiddo.
You too.
Let's bring in the closer. Enter Sandman. How are you, sir? What's your name?
My name's Tony. I'm from Vermont.
Hey, Tony, pleasure to meet you. How you doing?
Nice to meet you, LaPhonso.
You're beautiful up in Vermont, by the way.
Absolutely. Well, being a huge Notre Dame fan, I watched you through your career. But I wanted to know your fondest moment during your collegiate career at Notre Dame.
Fondest moment. I would say that would be my, two parts. One, going to Notre Dame, and then on the back end, our senior year, Digger had resigned after my Digger Phelps, legendary Digger Phelps, had resigned after my junior year, and we had four seniors: Keith Tower from Moon Township, PA, Elmer Bennett, Damon Sweet, both from Texas. We were kind of, anytime you have a coaching change that way, you're just unsure because you don't know if the new coach that's coming in is wanting to kind of start young, and what that means for the seniors. And so, but John McLeod, who had coached in the NBA for 18 years, successful coach at Oklahoma, he came in, sat us down, wanted to open up the floor for us, give us an opportunity to run and get out and play. And so that entire year, we didn't accomplish what we wanted to. We were hoping to get to the NCAA tournament and go deep in the tournament. We ended up getting to the championship game of the NIT, losing to Virginia. But that entire year, watching that group of seniors really give everything that they had in terms of leadership, both on the floor and off the floor, and trying to lead a team and set a tone for what, almost trying to carry out the vision that John McLeod had as the original visionaries. We felt a great sense of pride and a great sense of privilege being a part of that. And so my entire senior year would be, and of course going back to Digger Phelps bringing me to Notre Dame to begin with.
Nice.
Great, thank you, Tom.
Pleasure with you. Thanks for the love.
Ladies and gentlemen, one last round of applause for our new friend, LaPhonso Ellis. Now the fun continues. LaPhonso is going to head over to the table on my right, your left, and you can get in line. There are two lines. One on the right is for the hall.